Member for Couva South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In light of the decision of the government to cancel the US $71.7 million contract between China and, forgive my Mandarin, Deputy Speaker, Gezhouba Group International Engineering Company and the Housing Development Corporation, can the Acting Prime Minister inform this House of all penalties accruing to the government and/or HDC arising out of the said cancellation?
Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm advised that the HDC and the China Gezhouba Group International Engineering Company are currently in discussions in an effort to arrive at a mutually satisfactory resolution to the contract. As a result, there are no penalties accruing at this time.
Until Couva South.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can the Acting Prime Minister inform this House whether an advance payment or sum was issued on this contract over $500 million to the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago?
Mr. Acting Prime Minister.
Just 1 second. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm advised by the Minister of Housing that no advance payment was paid.
Supplemental, Couva South.
Can the Acting Prime Minister confirm that the framework agreement for this $500 million contract was signed in July of 2018 by the then Minister of Housing, who at the time was the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Rowley?
Acting Prime Minister.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm not privy to those details.
Couva South, supplemental.
Supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can the Acting Prime Minister state whether this contract for over $500 million was vetted by the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago?
I will not entertain that question at this time, member. Supplemental, member for Point-a-Pierre.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. To the Acting Prime Minister, based on his first response of the penalties at this point not being accruing, could the Acting Prime Minister state in the contract what would that penalty be if no proper, no positive negotiations have been concluded?
Acting Prime Minister.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm not privy to those details at this time.
Member for Couva South, final supplemental.
Can the Acting Prime Minister inform this House whether this contract for over $500 million was approved by the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago?
Acting Prime Minister.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the framework agreement was approved by the Cabinet.
Question number 5, member for Naparima.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can the Acting Prime Minister state whether any due diligence by the Office of the Attorney General was undertaken prior to the signing of the framework agreement between China Gezhouba Group International Engineering Company and the Housing Development Corporation on July 30, 2018?
Acting Prime Minister.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm advised that the framework agreement did not require the Attorney General to give an opinion on the contract.
Supplemental, member for Naparima.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Is it the norm for state enterprises to enter into contracts in the order of this magnitude without reference to oversight by either Cabinet or the Attorney General?
Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you very much,
Hold on,
Mr.
members, please.
Deputy Speaker. Firstly, the Housing Development Corporation is a statutory authority. It is not a state enterprise. It has its own rules according to statute, and the Housing Development Corporation does have the authority to determine its own contractual affairs.
Supplemental Naparimo.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
1 second. Member for Oropouche East. All right. I did not say anything earlier, but please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To the Prime Minister, is it the intention of your government to change this policy so that the requisite oversight will be maintained over contracts of this magnitude, and that the shareholder, as final resort, will not incur significant sovereign debt?
I will not entertain this question. Member for Naparimo.
Could the acting Prime Minister state what evidence at all subsequent to the decision of the board of the Housing Development Corporation to explain the recent termination of the contract?
Acting Prime Minister.
As far as I'm aware, that matter was already dealt with by the substantive Prime Minister at a press conference.
Member for Chaguanas West.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Honorable Acting Prime Minister, could you explain, having regard to your statement earlier, that the HDC is a statutory corporation, how do you reconcile that statement, and therefore it is entitled to its own legal approach, with the framework agreement coming before Cabinet for its approval?
Acting Prime Minister.
I think the answer to that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is self-evident. The framework agreement came before the Cabinet. That is a fact. And the question of the detailed contract is a matter for the Housing Development Corporation in accordance with the framework agreement. Correct.